The alien vampire woman was feared by everyone. I approached her anyway. The planet Viera was unlike any place humans had ever settled. Its sky glowed with two moons, one silver and one pale green, casting strange shadows across the rolling forests and jagged cliffs. The air was thick but breathable, carrying a sweet scent of unknown flowers and the faint hum of the planet itself. It was beautiful, but it was also a place of stories, stories that made the colonists wary and anxious. Among all the tales, one story frightened them the most. It was the story of an alien woman, a being who lived alone in the forests, whose pale skin glimmered like moonlight and whose eyes glowed a soft red in the dark. The colonists called her the Vampire Woman. No one knew her real name, and few had ever seen her closely. Some said she could appear and disappear like a shadow. Others whispered that she could control the minds of anyone who dared to get close. Most of these stories were shared around fires at night, in voices so low that the fear almost became real. For years she had been a mystery. She was feared not just because of her appearance but because of her powers, powers no one could explain. Her presence alone seemed to affect the wildlife. Birds stayed silent when she walked nearby. Small animals crept toward her rather than running away. The colonists noticed that where she passed, plants grew stronger and water flowed clearer. They did not understand her, and so fear had become the only story they could tell. Yet, not everyone in the colony was afraid. Among the settlers was Captain Eli Vance, a young xenobiologist who had recently arrived from Earth. Unlike the other colonists, Eli had a natural curiosity for the unknown. Where others saw danger, he saw an opportunity to learn. He had studied alien biology for years, hoping to discover creatures and life forms unlike anything humans had known. When he heard the stories about the vampire woman, his scientific mind immediately rejected the idea of a monster. She must be something extraordinary, Eli told himself one evening, standing on the cliffs that overlooked the dark forests. Something humans do not understand yet. Fear comes from ignorance. I need to see her to learn from her. Eli's fascination was not simple bravado. He had grown up in a city where curiosity was often punished by failure. In his youth, he had spent hours in libraries, reading books about stars, planets, and unknown worlds. He had always believed that understanding came from observing, not from hiding in fear. And now, here on Viera, he faced the chance to test that belief. The colony itself was small but thriving. Wooden and metal buildings were built to withstand the planet's unusual weather, sometimes strong winds that whipped across the cliffs, other times sudden rains that sparkled under the moons like liquid crystals. The colonists had farms, labs, and living quarters, but they were still cautious. They had learned to avoid the deep forest at night, fearing the stories about the vampire woman. Eli, however, ignored these warnings. To him, the forest was not dangerous. It was a laboratory waiting to be explored. Eli spent days preparing. He gathered tools for observation, a small recorder, a notebook, binoculars, and a special sensor to detect unusual energy patterns in the air. He also studied the wildlife from a distance, noticing how birds and small creatures moved differently in the forest. Something about the ecosystem seemed connected, balanced in a way he had never seen on Earth. And he suspected that the vampire woman, whoever she was, had something to do with it. One night, the moons were both high in the sky, casting a silvery green light across the landscape. The forest appeared alive in ways that words could hardly describe. Shadows danced between the trees and the air smelled of blooming flowers. Eli crept quietly toward the edge of the forest, careful not to make a sound. His heart raced, but not with fear. It was excitement. He had made a decision. He would approach the vampire woman tonight. Hours passed as he moved deeper into the forest. Strange noises echoed around him, whispers of the wind through leaves, the hum of unseen insects, and the occasional distant cry of an unknown creature. Eli paused, holding his breath. His instincts told him to run back to safety, but he reminded himself. This was the moment he had been waiting for. Curiosity outweighed fear, and then he saw her. At first, she was just a shadow among shadows. She moved with a grace that seemed unnatural, gliding rather than walking. Her skin shone faintly under the moons, like soft silver, and her long hair flowed behind her as if caught in an invisible breeze. Her eyes, bright red and glowing faintly, fixed on him, and for a moment Eli felt a shiver run down his spine. But then he noticed something else. She was not attacking. She was watching. She tilted her head slightly as if curious about him. There was intelligence in her gaze, a calm awareness that told Eli she was not simply an animal or a creature of instinct. She was something more. "Hello," Eli said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not here to hurt you. I only want to understand." The words hung in the air. The forest seemed to hold its breath. And then, slowly, she stepped forward, her movements silent on the forest floor. The red glow of her eyes softened, and she seemed to examine him with careful attention. Eli could see now that her sharp features were not frightening but striking, like a sculpture made by the planet itself. Eli lowered his hand slowly, showing he carried no weapons. He opened his notebook, scribbling quick sketches of her movements and gestures. She watched every motion, tilting her head as if learning about him in return. For what felt like hours, neither spoke. Communication was a dance of observation. Eli noticed how she seemed connected to the forest. Leaves turned toward her as she passed. Small animals approached without fear, and the hum of energy in the air grew stronger. He realized that the vampire woman, Salara, he decided to call her in his mind, was not a monster. She was a guardian, a living part of the ecosystem that humans had yet to understand. Finally, she did something unexpected. She extended her hand slightly, palm open, toward a small bird that had perched nearby. The bird did not fly away. Instead, it hopped closer and chirped softly. Eli understood then that her abilities were not dangerous. They were a form of connection, a way of communicating with life itself. Eli smiled, his fear replaced by wonder. "You're not what they think," he whispered to himself. "You're amazing." For the first time, he felt a real connection to someone entirely alien. Not fear, not legend, not stories, just understanding. And in that moment, he knew that the journey to learn about her was only beginning. The story he had heard from the colony, one of fear and danger, was only one version. The truth was far more complex and far more beautiful. As the first part of the night passed, Eli stayed in the forest, observing her. He took careful notes, recording the way she moved, how the forest responded to her presence, and how calm she made him feel. He realized that fear had blinded the colonists to the truth. They saw only shadows and imagined monsters. Eli saw life, intelligence, and connection. The moons climbed higher and a gentle mist rolled across the forest floor. Salara looked at Eli one last time before disappearing into the shadows, leaving him alone but not frightened. He sat quietly, thinking about everything he had seen. He knew he would return. He had to. There was so much more to learn, so much more to understand. And so, under the twin moons of Viera, the first step of a remarkable journey began. Eli had approached the being feared by all, and instead of danger, he found wonder. The legend of the vampire woman had begun to change, but the real story was still waiting to be discovered. After the night in which Eli first saw her, he could not stop thinking about the alien woman. The colonists' warnings seemed distant now, like echoes of a story he no longer believed. He knew she was not a monster. She was intelligent, graceful, and connected to the planet in ways humans could barely understand. He named her Salara in his mind, though he had no way of knowing if she would accept it. Eli spent the next day preparing carefully. He studied the forest from a distance, observing the paths she seemed to take, the way the wildlife reacted, and how the energy in the air changed around her. Every observation added more pieces to a puzzle he was eager to solve. He packed his notebook, a small energy sensor, a recorder, and some food, though he doubted he would share it with her. Still, he wanted to show respect in case she needed it. When night fell again, Eli approached the forest cautiously. The twin moons shone above, casting their silver and green light across the land. The forest seemed alive in a way that was almost musical. The hum of energy he had noticed the night before was stronger now. He stepped quietly, careful not to break twigs or alert wildlife to his presence. It did not take long for him to see her. Salara stood in a small clearing, her pale skin glowing faintly under the moonlight, her eyes fixed on him as he approached. But this time she did not step back or hide. It was as if she had been expecting him. Eli stopped a short distance away. "I want to learn about you," he said softly. "I don't mean to harm you." Salara tilted her head. Her glowing red eyes studied him closely, and Eli felt a strange sense of calm. There was intelligence in her gaze, a sense of understanding that went beyond words. She did not speak, yet Eli felt as if she was observing him as carefully as he was observing her. He took a small step forward. "I want to understand the forest, the animals, and you." Salara did not move. Instead, she extended a slender hand toward the clearing. Small plants which had been bent or broken seemed to straighten themselves. Flowers opened their petals in a slow, graceful motion, as if responding to her presence. Eli realized then that her abilities were not dangerous. They were a form of communication with the world around her. Carefully, he pulled out his notebook and began to sketch her movements. He observed how she interacted with the forest, how a small bird approached her without fear, how the leaves seemed to follow her as she walked, and how the air seemed to hum with energy. He noticed that even the shadows moved differently around her, softening instead of stretching sharply. Hours passed in quiet observation. Eli was fascinated by her connection to the planet. She was not just living on Viera, she was a part of it. Her presence influenced the environment in subtle, beautiful ways. He realized that the colonists' fear had been misplaced. They had seen only the unknown, and the unknown had become terrifying. Finally, Eli decided to try something new. He placed a small, smooth stone on the ground and stepped back. "Can you show me how you communicate with life?" he asked. Salara approached the stone. She did not touch it directly but raised her hand above it. A soft glow emanated from her palm, and the stone began to vibrate gently, almost as if alive. The light spread to the surrounding plants, and Eli could see the energy flow, like a network connecting every living thing in the clearing. He gasped softly. "It's incredible you are not harming anything. You are helping." Salara paused, her glowing eyes meeting his. For the first time she made a sound, a soft, melodic hum. It was not a word, but it carried meaning. Eli felt as if the hum was telling him, "I have lived here for a long time. I protect this place. I do not wish harm, but I will defend it if necessary." Eli smiled. "I understand. I want to learn, not to fight." Salara stepped closer, allowing him to observe her more closely. He noticed details he had missed before. The delicate patterns on her skin, the way her hair seemed to shimmer like liquid silver, and the intelligence in every movement. She was beautiful, but her beauty was more than physical. It was a reflection of her connection to the world, her ability to live in harmony with life. Over the next several nights, Eli returned to the forest. Each time, he brought small gifts, fruits, clean water, and sometimes music from a small device. Salara seemed to understand the gestures. She never accepted the gifts in the way humans would, but she acknowledged them, and Eli could see a bond forming. Through observation, Eli learned more about her abilities. She could sense the health of plants, detect danger in the forest, and even communicate with animals in subtle ways. Birds would follow her, small mammals would approach, and the rivers seemed to flow more clearly when she was near. Eli recorded everything carefully. He knew that humans might never see such a being, and he wanted to preserve the knowledge. The more he learned, the more Eli realized that fear had been the colony's enemy, not Salara. She was misunderstood, and misunderstanding had created a legend of terror. In reality, she was a protector, a guardian of the planet. Her so-called vampire traits, pale skin, glowing eyes, nocturnal habits, were adaptations to Viera's unusual environment. They allowed her to survive in ways humans could not yet comprehend. One night, as Eli observed her from a short distance, he noticed a subtle change. Salara paused and looked directly at him, then moved closer than before. She raised her hand, and a faint, glowing light connected with him briefly. Eli felt a warmth in his chest, not pain, not fear, just a gentle, reassuring presence. He understood in that moment that she was allowing him into her world, trusting him despite being cautious. Eli realized something important. This was not just about observation. It was about connection. Humans often approached life with fear or exploitation, but Salara had no reason to trust him. Yet he had shown patience, respect, and curiosity without harm. That had earned him a place, however small, in her understanding. The nights passed, and the colonists continued their routine in the settlement, oblivious to the interactions in the forest. They whispered stories of the vampire woman, but Eli knew that those stories were false. The truth was far more wondrous. He began to dream of ways humans could learn from her rather than fear her. One evening, he brought a small recorder. He wanted to capture her hums and sounds, hoping to analyze them later. Salara did not move away. Instead, she hummed again, a melodic, rhythmic sound that seemed to pulse with the life of the forest. The recorder picked up the faint vibrations, and Eli listened carefully. There was intelligence in the tones, a pattern he could not yet decipher, but it felt like communication. Eli spoke softly. "I want to understand your language, your way of thinking. Can you teach me?" Salara tilted her head, then made another hum, slightly different this time. She extended her hand toward him again, and this time Eli noticed the faint glow spreading from her palm, connecting briefly to him. It was like a bridge of energy, a shared understanding without words. He felt calm, aware, and more connected to the forest than he had ever felt. Eli realized that Salara's abilities were not magical. They were natural adaptations to the planet's energy. Her connection to life, her powers, were a form of intelligence evolved over centuries. And humans had much to learn from her, if only they were willing to observe and listen rather than fear and destroy. As dawn approached, Salara retreated into the shadows of the forest, leaving Eli alone with his thoughts. He packed his notebook carefully and returned to the settlement, eager to record his findings. He knew the colonists would not believe him. They might even call him foolish. But he did not care. He had seen the truth. The fear that had ruled Viera for so long was beginning to dissolve, at least for him. Salara was not a threat. She was a guide, a teacher, and a living part of the planet. Eli's determination grew. He would continue to learn from her, understand her abilities, and perhaps one day help the colonists see her as he now did, not a monster, but a being worthy of respect and understanding. And so, under the twin moons of Viera, a new chapter of understanding began. Eli's approach had not only revealed the truth about Salara, but it had also begun to show a path for humans to coexist with the unknown, to embrace curiosity and empathy over fear. The legend of the vampire woman had shifted, and the first steps toward a new friendship, between human and alien, observer and guardian, had begun. The nights on Viera grew longer, and the twin moons shone brighter as Eli returned to the forest each evening. He had spent many nights observing Salara, learning about her abilities and building trust, but now he wanted to understand more. The bond between them had grown quietly, a connection built on patience, curiosity, and respect. He could see that she trusted him at least partially, and he wanted to go further, to understand her world, her purpose, and the planet itself through her eyes. Eli entered the forest carefully, carrying only his notebook and a small device to record the soft hum she made. He had decided not to bring gifts tonight, wanting to communicate without distractions. The forest was alive with sounds and lights, but it was calmer than usual. The plants seemed to bend toward him as he walked, as if sensing his presence and intentions. The air hummed softly, a gentle energy that made him feel grounded and alert. There, in a clearing illuminated by the greenish light of the moons, Salara waited. She stood with her arms slightly raised, palms glowing faintly. Eli stopped a few meters away, bowing his head slightly in respect. "Good evening, Salara," he said softly. "I want to learn more about your world, about the life here, and about you." Salara tilted her head, her eyes glowing brighter for a moment. Then slowly she walked toward him. Eli noticed how the plants along her path straightened and how the small animals nearby became calm, unafraid. When she stopped, she raised her hand slightly, and Eli felt the faint hum of energy brush against him. It was not touch in the human sense. It was a flow of understanding, a connection that conveyed a message without words. Eli closed his eyes for a moment, letting the feeling sink in. He felt peace, awareness, and a strange clarity about the forest. It was as if Salara was showing him the rhythm of life on Viera, the delicate balance between every plant, animal, and even the wind that rustled the leaves. He opened his eyes slowly, filled with awe. "You're amazing," he whispered. "You see everything, understand everything. The forest listens to you." Salara made a soft hum, melodic and gentle. Eli felt the vibrations, recognizing that it was her way of communicating. He tried to hum back softly, imitating her tone, and to his surprise, she responded with a slightly different rhythm. The subtle exchange continued for a few minutes. Each hum was like a sentence, each vibration a thought. Eli realized that Salara had a language of energy, of connection, that humans had never known. He sat down carefully on the soft moss, keeping his movements slow and calm. Salara mirrored him, lowering herself slightly to his level. Around them, the forest seemed to quiet, listening to the interaction. Birds perched silently on nearby branches, small mammals peeked from the underbrush, and the gentle flow of water from a nearby stream seemed to grow stronger, more harmonious. Eli tried to communicate again, this time using gestures along with hums. He pointed to a small tree, then to Salara, asking if she could show him how she communicates with plants. She stepped closer to the tree, raised her hands above the leaves, and a soft glow emanated from her palms. The leaves began to quiver gently, and Eli noticed that the tree seemed to grow taller and stronger, its colors brighter. It was subtle, but it was undeniable. "You are helping it grow," Eli said, awed. "Not controlling, helping. That's incredible." Salara responded with a long hum, the vibrations moving through the clearing like ripples in water. Eli felt as if the hum carried the essence of her thoughts. Life is precious. Every part matters. Balance is everything. He nodded slowly, understanding that her powers were not about domination or harm. They were about nurturing, guiding, and maintaining harmony. For the next several hours, Eli observed and practiced small gestures of communication with her. He learned that patience was essential. The forest would respond only when his intention was pure, when his curiosity was genuine and unhurried. Salara seemed to sense dishonesty or distraction, and if she detected it, the hums would stop, and the glow in her eyes would dim. It was a delicate dance of respect, trust, and focus. Eli began to understand something deeper. Humans often approach the unknown with fear or aggression, assuming control rather than connection. Salara, however, existed in perfect balance with the world around her. Her so-called vampire traits, the pale skin, the glowing eyes, and her nocturnal habits were adaptations, but they also reflected her understanding of life's subtle energies. She was a guardian, not a predator. The next few nights were spent exploring the forest together. Salara allowed Eli to follow her to areas humans had never seen. Glowing meadows filled with luminous flowers, streams where the water shone faintly like liquid crystal, and ancient groves of trees that whispered when the wind passed through them. Eli recorded everything in his notebook, careful not to disturb the delicate environment. Each discovery filled him with awe, and he began to see Viera not just as a planet to colonize, but as a living entity. Salara taught him in ways beyond words about the interconnectedness of life. He noticed patterns in the hums, vibrations in the air, and subtle movements of plants and animals. It was as if she was showing him a language of life itself, one that humans could not hear but could learn to sense. Eli realized that she was patient and wise, not just because she was ancient, but because understanding life required time and careful attention. One evening, a small incident tested their trust. A wild creature, larger than any Eli had seen, approached the clearing. It had glowing eyes and long, sharp claws, but it did not immediately attack. Salara stepped forward, hands raised, and hummed a low, melodic tone. The creature paused, then slowly lowered its head and retreated. Eli watched in awe. He realized that her powers were not about fear, they were about respect. Even a creature much larger and potentially dangerous would follow her guidance rather than attack. Eli wrote in his notebook, "Her influence is subtle but absolute. Life responds to her not out of fear but understanding. She is a protector, not a predator." The nights passed and their bond grew stronger. Eli noticed that he began to think in ways he had never thought before. He started to see the world not as separate beings struggling for survival, but as a network of life, each part connected to the other. Salara had not only taught him about her abilities, but about seeing life from a new perspective, one of empathy, harmony, and patience. One night he asked aloud, "Why do the colonists fear you, Salara? They do not understand. They think you are dangerous." Salara tilted her head and hummed softly, a sound that Eli interpreted as agreement. She led him to a small clearing where the plants were darker, shadows more pronounced. Eli understood then that fear had created stories, legends that distorted reality. Humans feared what they did not understand, and that fear had been passed down through generations. Salara had lived with it quietly, observing, protecting, and waiting for someone who would see the truth. Eli felt a sense of responsibility. He realized that knowledge was not just for himself, it could help others see Salara as he now did. But he also understood that humans had to approach carefully. The lesson Salara had taught him was clear. Connection required patience, respect, and empathy. One wrong step could undo trust. As the night deepened, Eli and Salara sat quietly in the clearing. He recorded the hums, sketched the glowing patterns of her energy, and reflected on what he had learned. He realized that fear had been the colonists' barrier, not her powers. Salara had the ability to teach, to guide, and to protect, but only if humans were willing to understand rather than dominate. By the time dawn approached, Eli packed his notebook carefully. He knew the forest would remain safe and untouched as long as Salara was present. He left the clearing slowly, looking back once. Salara watched him from the shadows, eyes glowing faintly, a silent promise that their bond would continue. That night, Eli walked back to the settlement with a heart full of wonder. He had learned more than he could have imagined, and he knew that the real story of the vampire woman was just beginning. She was no monster. She was a teacher, a guardian, and a living bridge between humanity and the unknown. And so, under the twin moons of Viera, the understanding between Eli and Salara grew. Through patience, observation, and respect, humans could learn not only about her, but about the delicate balance of life on a world far beyond Earth. Eli knew that the next step would be even more challenging. to help others see her not as a fearsome legend, but as a being worthy of trust, cooperation, and perhaps friendship. The days on Viera were calm, but Eli sensed tension brewing among the colonists. They had heard the stories of the vampire woman for years, and fear still lingered like a shadow over the settlement. Eli knew that the longer Salara remained unknown to the colony, the stronger the fear would grow. He understood that curiosity alone would not be enough. Eventually, humans would have to see her for themselves, and to do that safely, he would have to prepare. One morning, Eli met with the colony leaders, cautiously choosing his words. "There is no danger," he explained. "Salara is not a monster. She protects the forest and the wildlife. She does not harm humans unless they threaten her or the planet. I have observed her. I have been with her. She can teach us to live in harmony with Viera." The leaders frowned. "You expect us to trust a legend, a creature no one has ever seen. Many colonists have warned against entering the forest. Some have disappeared." "I understand their fear," Eli said, "but fear is not truth. Salara is intelligent, aware, and peaceful. If we approach her with respect, she can help us understand this planet in ways we cannot imagine. We cannot continue blindly exploiting the forest. One mistake could destroy the balance she has maintained for centuries." Despite his words, the leaders remained skeptical. They were pragmatic and cautious. Still, Eli knew he had planted a seed of thought. The colonists' fear was strong, but their curiosity might one day outweigh it. That night under the twin moons, Eli returned to the forest. Salara was waiting, as she always was. Her glowing eyes reflected curiosity, not caution as before, but interest. She seemed to sense the change in Eli's purpose. He no longer came just to learn. He came to build a bridge between her and the humans who feared her. "I want to show them," Eli said softly. "I want them to understand you, to see what I see." Salara hummed, the soft vibrations brushing against his chest like a gentle wind. She raised her hands and the forest responded. Flowers glowed faintly, streams reflected the moonlight more clearly, and small creatures emerged, unafraid. Eli realized that she was ready in her own way to reveal herself. But she would do so on her terms, not the humans, and that was important. The following days, Eli planned carefully. He chose a small group of colonists, those he knew were curious, patient, and respectful. They followed him quietly to the forest's edge, unsure of what to expect. Whispers passed among them, some nervous, some skeptical. "What if it's dangerous?" one asked. Eli smiled gently. "You will see for yourselves. Fear has created the legend. The truth is far more amazing." As they entered the forest, the air seemed to change. It was quieter, calmer, as if the entire ecosystem knew something important was about to happen. Salara stepped forward, glowing faintly under the moons, her presence commanding but serene. The colonists froze at first, unsure whether to take a step closer. Eli gestured for them to remain calm. "She is not dangerous," he whispered. "Watch carefully, listen, observe." Salara raised her hand and immediately the wildlife responded. Birds landed on branches nearby, small animals emerged from the underbrush, and even the plants seemed to shift toward her. The colonists gasped. This was not what they had expected. It was not fear they felt, but awe. One of the younger colonists, a botanist named Mara, stepped closer. She's beautiful," she whispered. "And the forest, it's alive in a way I've never seen." Eli nodded. "Yes, she protects it. She has lived here for centuries, maintaining balance. Everything you see, the trees, the streams, the animals, they respond to her because she is part of them." Salara moved slowly among the group, never touching anyone, but her energy brushed past them like a gentle wind. Each colonist felt a strange calm, a sense of understanding and connection they could not explain. They realized without doubt that the stories of terror were false. She was not a monster. She was a guardian. Eli led the colonists to a small clearing where Salara demonstrated her abilities further. She raised her hands toward a group of withering plants. A soft glow emerged from her palms, and the plants straightened, leaves turning brighter, flowers blooming anew. The colonists watched in silence, marveling at the miracle of life unfolding before them. "This is incredible," said Mara. "She's helping them grow, not controlling, not harming, just helping." Salara hummed a gentle tune, and Eli felt the vibrations ripple through the clearing. He realized she was communicating, showing the humans how life could exist in harmony if treated with care and respect. It was not magic, it was understanding, patience, and connection. Over the next several nights, more colonists came, each carefully guided by Eli. Some were hesitant at first, but all left with awe in their eyes. They began to see what he had seen. Salara was not a threat, but a teacher. The legend of fear began to fade, replaced by respect and wonder. However, not all humans were ready to accept her. A small group of miners, eager to expand their operations, did not trust Eli's words. They believed the forests were resources to exploit, and they feared being manipulated by a creature they did not understand. One evening they ventured into the forest without guidance, intending to claim the area for mining. Eli noticed them immediately. He rushed to Salara, explaining the situation. Her eyes glowed faintly red, a warning but not of anger. She understood the potential threat. Together, they moved to intercept the miners before any harm could be done. Salara stepped into the clearing where the miners were attempting to cut down a small grove of trees. Her presence alone was enough to make them stop. The birds scattered, the animals froze, and the air seemed to shimmer around her. She raised her hands, not in attack, but in a display of energy that communicated her authority and connection to the land. The miners hesitated. They saw the plants straighten, flowers bloom, and animals approach her without fear. Something in them shifted. Fear of the unknown was replaced with awe. They lowered their tools, unable to deny the truth before their eyes. Eli stepped forward. "This is Salara," he said firmly. "She protects this forest and everything in it. She is not here to hurt you. If you respect the forest, she will allow you to work here. If you try to destroy it, she will stop you. This is not magic, it is balance." For a moment, silence filled the clearing. Then one of the miners, the oldest and most stubborn, spoke. "We've heard stories, but this is real. She's not a monster, she's something else, something amazing." Salara hummed softly, as if acknowledging his words. The glow in her eyes softened, the tension in the clearing faded, and the forest seemed to breathe again. Eli realized that this was a turning point. Humans could finally see Salara as she truly was, not a legend of fear, but a being of wonder, intelligence, and protection. In the following days, the colonists worked together under Eli's guidance. They began to study the forest alongside Salara, learning how to move without harming the plants and how to coexist with the wildlife. They observed her rituals, her communication with life, and her deep understanding of Viera's delicate ecosystem. Slowly, fear gave way to curiosity, and curiosity to respect. Eli documented everything carefully, knowing that this knowledge could help humans live on Viera sustainably. He realized that Salara's role was more than protecting the forest. It was teaching humans to see beyond fear, to understand the world as a network of life, and to recognize that wisdom could come in forms they had never imagined. By the end of the month, the settlement had changed. The colonists no longer whispered fearful stories of the vampire woman. They spoke of her with awe and admiration. Children began to leave small gifts near the forest edge, flowers, stones, and drawings, symbols of respect rather than fear. Eli watched all of this quietly, proud of what had been accomplished. Salara had shown humans the beauty of understanding, the power of patience, and the importance of connection. She had revealed herself not through force, but through grace and guidance. And as the twin moons rose once more, casting silver and green light over the forest, Eli knew that the greatest lesson had been learned. Fear could be overcome by curiosity, respect, and courage. Salara was no longer just a legend. She was a teacher, a guardian, and a bridge between humanity and the unknown. The forest seemed to hum in agreement, alive with energy, and Eli felt a profound sense of hope. Together, humans and Salara had taken the first steps toward a future where fear no longer ruled, and understanding became the path forward.